समझ जाएगा मेरी चुप्पी से, वो नहीं समझेगा guys need to be drilled in. So please don't assume that we will understand just because of your silence. No, it's not happening. Speak up, be heard, knock it in the head if that needs to be done. But do it.
And not to dilute the issue at all, because this is Draupadi.
A modern take on mythology. Utkarsh Patel's latest book, Silencing Draupadi, reinterprets the Mahabharata's iconic heroine through a contemporary feminist lens. The book challenges traditional patriarchal readings of mythology, shedding light on Draupadi's struggles, agency, and voice. By questioning age-old narratives and offering fresh perspectives, Patel encourages readers to rethink mythology in the context of gender, power, and justice. Report Bilkil Online.
What is it that made me write this particular book? And I have only one way of looking at it, that, when I teach the subject of mythology, and I'm using the word teach, because there's a lot of misunderstanding with the idea that mythology mein padhane ka kya hai? It's stories, right? But no, it's not just stories. Because you need to understand the nuances, you need to understand the cultural milieu, you need to understand why the subject needs to be taught, because the time is not the same as we are in now. Also, the whole structure has changed, value system has changed. So often we come across people who are saying, what nonsense is this? This is ridiculous, this is irrational. So, were they really smoking something really potent that they wrote this? No, they were not smoking anything potent. They were writing about the times, they were writing about the culture. If it doesn't suit with you, too bad. But you got to deal with it, you got to hear it, you got to know what the story is about. And that is why we say that the subject needs to be taught. And when I've been teaching the subject over a decade now, and when I see across cultures, be it Mesopotamia, be it Egypt, be it Greece, be it India, be it Japan, this idea of the woman to be silenced, or a woman not to speak up before a man, or in front of a man, or even against a man, is a common aspect. So if anybody tells you that it only happens in India, or it only happens in Greece, no, it happens everywhere. And that explains the idea that it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of culture. It's got nothing to do with the culture A versus culture B. It's got to do with human beings per se. And since this aspect hasn't changed, I find this such a common subject even today, that I felt that this subject needed to be brought out. Of course, this came up more as a theory, but who reads theory papers, right? Because they'll be read in a seminar house, and it'll be filed in the archive, and it'll be forgotten. So I have always tried to do this, that take the theory, weave a story around it, that people read, and then let people understand, how did this happen, why did this happen? I'm bringing a book here which tells you what happened. Rather, let me rephrase that. I'm telling you about a book, and I'm telling you about something that could have happened. There is no evidence. Do I know it happened that way? No, I cannot say anywhere. But when I read the cultural documents of across the world, I often find something of this sort could well have happened. I could be wrong, I could be right. I leave the judgment down to you. Please read, agree to disagree. That's where we will end. With that, I invite Shraddha for a discussion.
Please have a seat. Yes, I also read that book.
We will keep questions for the audience once we are done with this talk. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If I know the answer, I will answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll spurt it.
And in between, questions are also welcome, I believe.
Yeah, please feel free. It's your forum today, so please feel free.
So first and foremost, when I approached Utkarsh and this book was in his brain only, it was in his mind, he approached Shankar sir that silencing Draupadi. I called him up and I asked why silencing Draupadi, and I remember your words. You had said very clearly that Shraddha, actually what had happened, that Draupadi is getting married, she is going, and Kunti is asking share. Do you think she must have had that idea only? Do you agree with this? Don't you think so that this is manipulated? What we've been taught, what we've been asked to follow is actually not true. Have you ever thought about it? This is what he was telling. And I think I heard you and then my mind was somewhere else. You gave me another question. And I want to tell you here that I'm doing a master's in women and gender studies, and I was asked to prepare a research paper. And inspired by your book, I've given the credits as well. I'll give you that paper as well. I published a paper, Draupadi's narrative in Mahabharata versus in the Palace of Illusions and Utkarsh silencing Draupadi. So once my guide signs that, I'll send that paper to you. It is so important to talk about this because everywhere we see, and you said very rightly here, that it is not only about India. Today only I was watching a series on Netflix, Adolescence. It is very much talked about. And misogyny is one thing that boys to be, it is they're told to be masculine. And it is rooted in them since they are born, I believe. And that's what happened. So, and if somebody comes up and says, why do we talk about Draupadi now? So we are following Ramayana everywhere. We are having a lot of talks about, we are following Ram Mandir when we are living. So why not talk about Draupadi when we want to bring feminism? So, first of all, many congratulations and a big thank you for making me a part of this project. It is totally an honor. My question to you would be, the first and foremost question would be, why did you choose this title, Silencing Draupadi?
Okay, actually let me be honest, there is a mentor I have in absence, and I say in absence because I've never had the opportunity to meet him. I'm in touch with him. He writes some wonderful papers, and his name is Professor Satya Chaitanya. My first book was also based on what I read from him. My second book, Satyavati, was also based on what I read from him. And he had done a research paper on this idea of silencing, and he's given us many examples. Of course, his examples have been more related to Indian mythology only. And I thought that if I use Draupadi's example, because it's one of the most glaring examples in the eye. Here is a woman who's got the audacity to stand up in a man's court, it's the who's who of Aryavat, and say, sorry, Karna, you cannot participate in this swayamvar. Later on, when she's brought in that disheveled condition, she's abused, she's molested, she's tried to disrobe. Even then, she has her sense to ask some very pertinent questions, which nobody in the Sabha could answer, including Bhishma, though he mumbled some Indian stuff, which made no sense to anybody then, nor anybody now. And then Jayadratha also, she threatens to say that, you dare touch me, see what happens to you. A woman of this sort quietly gets married to 5 men when she was blindly in love with Arjun. It just didn't settle down with me well. That what happened? Somebody who's so vocal, somebody who's just had a big argument in the Sabha, actually just behaves docile. This kind of went against her character, is my interpretation here. I somehow am unable to accept that she wouldn't have said anything. That is what made me realize that it was one of the most important moments of her life.
Absolutely.
And she chose to keep quiet. Did she? That's where I'm coming from. And I thought that that's why I chose the name, that Silencing Draupadi. Because silencing Draupadi is another challenge. She's one of the most vocal women. She's not a Sita, she's not an Ahalya, she's not a Savitri. She's Draupadi. So when I say that silencing Draupadi, that might sound like a contradiction to a lot of people. Saying that how could that happen? But it has happened. Can you deny that fact? And that is why I chose the name, that Silencing Draupadi is the name, and I think it does strike. I know somebody wrote to me that, isn't this a weird kind of a name that you've chosen, Silencing Draupadi? Can anybody silence Draupadi? I said, yeah, some people can, and some people have, as we see in my book. Sorry, I think you were saying something.
That's an oxymoron.
It's an oxymoron, absolutely. It's an oxymoron.
And I would call it a broader metaphor to represent the society.
Absolutely.
This
The way
kind of
we've been
title
taught.
works. Oxymoron.
Okay, I hope it works, but that wasn't behind my mind. It's just that it struck me that this works really well to say that how can anybody stop her from, speaking.
So I was saying that broader metaphor, because this we have been seeing. Every woman has to listen first, and then she suffers for a long, sometimes for 40, 45, 50 years, and many of the times they die with that suffering only. Most of the times it happens like that only. Some of the times they speak, and by the time they learn to speak, they don't have anything. It's too late. I mean, usi जीवन में कितने अवतार लेने. The most important part of this book which I loved was the narrative cannibalism. You have used the narrative cannibalism. This is a concept by Rebecca Solnit.
Right.
So, in your view, how have male-centric interpretation of mythology historically shaped our perception of strong female characters? So, I want you to talk about that.
Rebecca Solnit is somebody who's worked extensively in silencing of the voice, and those who have not read her, please read. If you've not even read her, do listen to her podcasts. She's absolutely explosive. In one of the texts, she writes about this concept of narrative cannibalism, and to define narrative cannibalism, I won't take a lecture here at the moment, but to define narrative cannibalism is that how male voices, because of the power, because of the bombardment attitude, whichever way you want to look at it, end up eating the voices of the females, whereby either they are loud and so the voice gets stifled, or they use such bombastic word and the woman is trying to make a message or give a very simple view and that gets clouded. That's what we call by narrative cannibalism. What we have seen time and again is that because of the power of speech, because of the power of the personality of the author, often they shine out and the relatively lesser known female authors are not heard. Let me give a very simple example. How many of you sitting here have heard the name of Chandravati? Chandravati. Yeah, I've given a hint that she's from the east. See,
Chandravati Ramayana.
yes, right? One person. In this entire crowd, there's only one person who's heard about Chandravati. Chandravati is the one who wrote an entire Ramayana from Sita's perspective. And this is such a powerful document written way back in the 16th century. Even then, she was ostracized, her book was burned in public, even then. Right now, I think she would be burnt at stake. But then, only the book was burned, despite the fact that she was somebody who was known to write songs for gods. So she was a Baromashi singer. In Bengali, when we say Baromashi, these are songs which are sung across the year. And these are religious songs which are sung all the time. She was a prominent Baromashi singer, writer. But when she wrote Chandravati's Ramayana, it got frittered away. And after her death, nobody knew. We needed, what's her name? I'm forgetting the name, the Devsen, the author.
Navonita Devsen.
Navonita Devsen. We needed a Navonita Devsen to literally go hunting all around Bangladesh. It was the then Moimanshing, which is in Bangladesh today, to go all over the place hunting for the songs put together in a narrative form and publish a book in English. And that's how people know Chandravati. Now, what happened? Why was her voice stifled? And it's such a powerful document. You all must read. Those who have not read Chandravati's Ramayana, it's now available in English. Please read. Just see the power that it has. You might not agree with it. You don't have to agree with it. It's your choice. But the power that document shows us is how Sita thinks. And there are some explosive ways where Sita describes Ram. 16th century awareness of a woman who's so easily forgotten. That's what I give an example of narrative cannibalism. Today we know every other author. We know Goswami Tulsidas, we know Kamban, we know Kritivash, we know just about everybody. But none of us know Chandravati. That is the tragedy. And it is a document to be read. And I urge each one of you, please take time out to read that book. It's a brilliant piece of work. You don't have to define. There was no definition of feminism way back in the 16th century. Nobody knew what was feminism. Chandravati actually knew it without using the word feminism. That's the power. Please read.
Now I would request you to read the most favorite part. I know the entire book is written by you, so this is your favorite.
Yeah.
The most difficult part of the session would be this, that you have to pick up your favorite part and read it for us.
So this is So this is a text where a lady is saying about the men in those times. And she says that, and I quote, "Women are good as long as they are quiet, docile, helpless and submissive. But a rebellious woman, a woman who challenges and provokes, asserts and speaks her mind is not acceptable. She's dangerous, as her weapons cannot be countered by men. She has to be silenced. History, they say, is written by winners, so are epics. Except that the storytellers are men, and it is carried forward too by men who want to continue to win." So, there is another character who asks, but then we also have a Mahakali, right, who's violent and who kills him. Exactly. Then there is a goddess. Mahakali is not a woman, she's a goddess. Men will worship women like Kali and others, but would never want a wife of her kind. For a wife, one wants Lakshmi, who sits at her husband's feet, or a Parvati, who is willing to take birth again to marry her husband, Lord Shiva. See how docile and faithful they are? Women who rebel will either be deified or demonized. Supanaka only expressed a desire to marry one of the two brothers, Ram or Lakshman. But what did they do? Lakshman severed her nose. A woman expressing her desire to marry another man, and that too in public, needs to be shamed. Who knows that in the community of the Rakshasis, maybe it was acceptable. In that area, it was okay for a woman to propose to a man. But you see, doesn't make sense to somebody. But the idea that such things are unacceptable in our society needed to be communicated. And how better to do that than with a punishment? Women who assert their wills and opinions need to be silenced.
Yes, to ask you.
Yeah.
Utkarsh sir was my English teacher since 9th grade, and so I had to ask you this, that it's very rare for a man to at least like have that empathy for a woman. What did you like while you were growing up? Was there anyone who inspired you, or what made you think like that? Like it's just a curiosity that I had.
Well, I don't want to sound very Freudian on this, but I mean, my mom was very, very, what should I say, somebody who would kind of inculcate this whole idea, that times are changing and you need to look at it in a different way. And I think I had a lot of debates about this, and it was very open debate. When my mom didn't get an answer, she would simply give up and say, "Okay, mujhe iska nahi pata." Okay? When you grow up, you find it out yourself. But she never told me, "Don't ask these questions. This is a religious text. Ye Bhagwan ki kahani hai. You can't ask that question." That I was never told in my life. So to that extent, yes, I think there was a good influence of that. And I think subsequently when I started reading, and I've been reading a lot. So when I read, I do tend to find these kind of anomalies which kind of bother me. And they keep biting into me till I don't, take it out in some form or the other. So that's how it is. But I'm not, I don't think that if you're a man, you are not able to think like this. It's just that we tend to shut a side of ours. Because we tend to think, oh, that's a feminine angle, वैसे सोचने की ज़रूरत नहीं. Like, how we are brought up, how we bring up boys not to cry. Yeah. That's a feminine angle. To think of feminine aspects, often in this so-called male-dominated society, we look at it as something not nice. But I think I never felt that kind of pressure to not to express. And that's why I think out of 5 books, 4 of them are on, so just to make it right, I wrote 1 book on a male god also. Lest I be branded as somebody who can't think beyond this. Yeah.
I have done my PhD research, for which Sir Shakuntala, the Moon Ram, was one of my primary texts, and that's how I got to know him. And considering what I've read there, and I will be here, but based on what you've discussed, when you say silencing Draupadi, or in fact it's not just Draupadi, if you consider any woman from mythology, she is in a way silenced. But and you mentioned how it's the characters or whatever, and like you mentioned in some...
Forget Surya. She called Dharmaraj first, then she called Indra, then she called Pavan, then she called Indra, and then when Pandu said one more, what did she say? She said, no, more than 4 is not allowed in scripture. And I have that verse from Mahabharata in this book. Obviously, Pandu in his own mind didn't ask, how 4? Abhi to 3 hi hue hain. Right? When same Kunti says that a woman who has more than 4 partners is a prostitute, is pushing her own daughter-in-law to marry 5 men, ये सवाल क्यों किसी ने नहीं किया है? How has nobody asked this question? And that is where I'm coming from, that there is a purpose behind it. It's not a slight of error. That's what it is.
Yeah, one more thing, silencing Draupadi.
forget Surya, she called Dharmaraj first, then she called Indra, then she called Pavan, then she called Indra. And then when Pandu said, one more, what did she say? She said, no, more than 4 is not allowed in scripture. And I have that verse from Mahabharata in this book. Obviously, Pandu in his own mind didn't ask, how 4? Abhi to 3 hi hue hain. Right? When same Kunti says that a woman who has more than 4 partners is a prostitute, is pushing her own daughter-in-law to marry 5 men, ये सवाल क्यों किसी ने नहीं किया है? How has nobody asked this question? And that is where I'm coming from, that there is a purpose behind it. It's not a slight of error. That's what it is.
Yeah, one more thing, silencing Draupadi.